already between the time I put in the sermon title to the newsletter and the time that I actually sat down to write the message, I came to a revelation that I wanted to change the nature of this sermon. So the actual title is not The Lotus Way. Rather, it is How to Become a Buddha. When I attended Meadville Lombard Theological School in preparation for the ministry, I lived the first year in seminary housing, meaning the second floor of a house owned by the theological school across the street. 4 of us were permanent residents there. One of my housemates was a Japanese man named Takashi. Takashi was a lay instructor for Rishokoshkai, a lay Buddhist sect with which the Unitarian Universalists are allied. One day we were sitting at the kitchen table and talking about religion in the United States. I do not understand American Buddhism, Takashi said. Therefore, Buddhism is totally unlike anything I have ever experienced in Japan. In the conversation, I came to the conclusion that Takashi felt that American Buddhism is a form of Western religion influenced by Asian Buddhism. Takashi felt that Americans do not understand Buddhism as he did. Today, I will share with you some of my understanding of Buddhism and the attainment of the Buddha nature. It might not be what you have heard because the American form of Buddhism is different, and my knowledge about Buddhism is mostly about the Asian form. American Buddhism is a form of Buddhism that is distinct. It does not have the same beliefs exactly that Buddhism has throughout the world. That does not mean that American Buddhism is wrong, though. It just means that it is different. Until the late 1960s, Buddhists, even in Asia, were unaware of the beliefs and practices of other Buddhists. Buddhists in Japan had hardly any contact with Buddhists in Sri Lanka on the island of Ceylon, south of India. They knew very little bit about each other. There was an first international conference of Buddhists that occurred in the late 1960s. It was held in Thailand, and the Thai monks were convening this international conference, and they were bringing all these Buddhists together for the first time in world history. Buddhists from all over the world would be sharing the same space. To show how little the Thais knew about Buddhism in other places, when they sent out materials to the Japanese Buddhists, their monks in Japan contacted the Thais and said, "Do you have places for us to live with our wives and children?" The Thai Buddhists were horrified. They had no knowledge that Buddhist monks anywhere were married and had children. It just was inconceivable in their culture. But that tells you how different Buddhists are from place to place. In some ways, they're like the average Roman Catholic in this country, or some other forms of Christianity, even in this country. For example, after I married my wife, 2 of my wife's Roman Catholic friends assumed that I would have to leave the Unitarian Universalist ministry because I got married. These were 2 women with college degrees in their late 30s who grew up in New Jersey. It is amazing how little some people, even in this religiously diverse country, know about the beliefs and practices of other religions. Tuesday this week is Bodhi Day, the annual commemoration of the day that Siddhartha Gautama became enlightened and attained the Buddha nature. He gained enlightenment and moved into Nibbana, becoming a being outside the cycle of life and death. To understand becoming a Buddha, it helps to know what certain terms in Buddhism mean, and some things about Buddhism itself. Buddhism is an ancient religion that grew out of Hinduism. In a sense, Buddhism is to Hinduism as Christianity is to Judaism. Both Christianity and Buddhism derived from an earlier faith and then became distinct. Like Christianity's relationship to Judaism, Buddhism uses some of the same terms as Hinduism, but they mean different things. In Christianity, words like God, Messiah, angel, and many other terms are derived from Jewish usage, but they often mean different things. Jews are often confused by Christian theologies, and Christians are usually remarkably ignorant of Jewish theology. This situation is similar to the relationship between Buddhism to Hinduism. Buddhists use terms like Kama, Bhagava, Brahma, Gita, Mandala, Mantra, Nibbana, and Rupa, Samdhi, Samsara, and other words that derive from the Hindu faith. But sometimes they mean different things in Buddhism, much like the different meanings for terms in theology in Judaism and Christianity. Buddhism is a religious perspective that believes that life is cyclical, with a constant cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. This cycle is called samsara. Buddhists share this belief with Hindus, but they interpret it differently. In Hinduism, the soul is immortal and is reincarnated in a different body, and one gains wisdom through the attainment of karma. Buddhists, by contrast, do not believe in reincarnation as the same thing. The other aspect of this cycle of life, death, and life again is that it is not something one should view as a good thing. One suffers and hopefully learns something from one existence to the next, but the cycle of samsara is not pleasant, and some people want to get out of it. Well, sane people want to get out of it, and some people do too. In Hinduism, the cycle of samsara, birth, suffering, death, life, has no definite end. It continues forever with the Atman, soul, gaining wisdom from each incarnation. In this regard, Buddhism probably began as a sect of Hinduism that offered a solution to the constant repetition of existence. Buddhists believe the cycle of samsara will eventually end for every karmic existence, every life. It ends when one has become a Buddha and transcends attachment, when one is aware of one's connections to the universe, when one is no longer engaged in one's own thoughts, but is able to experience the life that is a larger existence. One has lost oneself and is now one with the universe. When this happens, one has attained nirvana, or as often said in some languages, nirvana. And one will be outside the cycle of samsara, when one dies physically because one's existence is the universe itself. By becoming unattached, one attains the ultimate attachment, connection to everything. The way to attain nirvana is through meditation that clears the mind of thought and connects one to the universe. Meditation in Buddhism is a way of emptying oneself so that truth might shine through. Asian Buddhists believe that everyone should meditate, not necessarily for personal benefit, but for the benefit of the karmic existence. One meditates for the benefit of the next person who will be born with one's karma, not necessarily for one's life in this existence. In Hinduism, karma is spiritual reward for spiritual attainment in one life that is passed on to the personality of the next life. In Buddhism, karma is different. It is not something especially attached to a specific soul in the same way, but like a spiritual bank account. It's a poor analogy, I know, but that was explained to me when I took a graduate course, 2 graduate courses in Buddhism. Eventually, someone will attain enough karma through meditation and spiritual growth to break the cycle of samsara, life and death, and rebirth. Years ago, an Asian friend told me, "Larry, you have an old soul." At first, I thought this was a good thing. Afterward, though, I realized that her comment meant that I was like a boy repeating the second grade for the third time. I kept having to go through the same thing until I learned the lessons and moved up the chain of being. I had suffered through many karmic existences in her view. For Buddhists, this suffering comes through attachments like love for a specific person, nation, wealth, occupation, game, or anyone or anything else. This does not mean that Buddhists do not believe that love is wrong. They believe that love is only spiritually sound when it is applied in equal measure, universally. This means they should love everyone, everything, with a universal love and not love for only one person. They are not supposed to have an object for their affection, but love the universe to which they are connected. They call this compassion, or the great compassion. In Buddhism, enlightenment happens in small doses in almost every incarnation. One gains insight into existence through suffering and meditation, and that insight is passed on to the next life. Sometimes the next holder of the insight forgets that learning from a past incarnation and has to go back to learn that insight from other forms of existence. Supreme enlightenment is a result of learnings from other lives coming to fruition in one lifespan. The Buddha is cognizant of all previous lifetimes and is aware of the lessons learned. The Buddha experiences Nibbana with its concurrent cessation of greed, hatred, and delusion. Some forms of Buddhism believe that a Buddha becomes omniscient, knowing all in the past, present, and future, not just about oneself, but the entire universe. As the Buddha, the first Buddha, states in the Maha Sakada Sutra, "My heart, thus knowing, thus seeing, was released from the fermentation of sensuality, released from the fermentation of becoming, released from the fermentation of ignorance. With release, there was the knowledge. Released, I discerned that birth is ended, the holy life fulfilled, the task done. There is nothing further for this world." Nibbana does not mean eternal death, however. Nibbana means that one exists forever as a being of pure consciousness. In some forms of Buddhism, one who attains Nibbana has the status of a god, but not the one that controls forces, not in the same way. In these theological perspectives, the Buddha only uses supernatural power to advance something along in Buddhism. Buddha grants someone experiences in order that the person will gain insight leading to the next stage in the journey through samsara. A Buddha grants that person in one lifetime some learning that will be passed on to the next lifetime, the next person born in this spiritual journey. In life, someone who attains the Buddha nature is considered in non-Western Buddhism to have supernatural abilities. The Buddha is omniscient, knowing everything, and through all that omniscience, is able to alter reality in service to the goal that everyone will eventually become a Buddha. A Buddha is aware that the learning through samsara cannot be rushed, although Mahayana Buddhists want to move further along than the other schools of Buddhism do. One of the distinctions between American and Asian Buddhism is that Buddhism in Asia is connected to forms of theism, while American Buddhism often states that one does not have to believe in God to be a Buddhist. In Asia, Buddhism links to various forms of belief in God or gods. In Buddhist legends, the Buddha speaks with deities and other supernatural beings. God or gods acknowledge that humanity will eventually attain Buddha nature and that all life will eventually transcend physical existence. And at a certain level, they all know that they will also become Buddhas. The deities or spirits can either help or hinder the Buddha's efforts to bring about enlightenment. Though it is understood in the legends that the Buddha and other future Buddhas will eventually succeed. The deities, or spirits, are only temporarily powerful. The Buddha instructs them with every life through many lifetimes progresses into a sentient being who eventually becomes a Buddha. This is a kind of universalism. In time, every being will eventually attain this transcendence. So how does one become a Buddha? It will not happen in this lifetime unless you head immediately to a Buddhist monastery or convent. That's what it would take. Should you decide to do that immediately, please let us know. However, if you want to spend the journey to enlightenment, and here are some of the ways. Join this congregation Sangha, which is a Buddhist group that is involved in meditation and learning about Buddhism. Even if you're not good at meditating, belonging to a Buddhist community might bring good karma and insight. And who knows, maybe it'll be passed on in the next life. Learn about Buddhism. This may be accomplished in many different ways. Buddhist scriptures are readily available online. Be willing to experience cross-cultural experiences with people who live in Buddhist cultures. Practice compassion. Compassion is love for everyone, instead of love for one being, or person, or thing. Compassion means working to alleviate the suffering of others. Compassion is not a passive spiritual practice, and is probably the most difficult aspect of Buddhism, even for Unitarian Universalists. Imagine being called by your spirituality to feel love so great that you could love some of our politicians. It's not an easy thing to understand. Compassion means being involved in social justice or other ways of caring that alleviate suffering. Most importantly, meditate. Meditation is a Buddhist spiritual practice that is intended to reorder the mind so that conscious thought is arrested and just being present is experienced. That is admittedly not the best definition, but it fits. If one meditates for long periods, one might attain the state of being without self-conscious personhood. This is the condition where one is so connected spiritually that one loses oneself in the larger reality of the world. One becomes a selfless person. It's not a simple concept to convey. Find a meditation instructor who knows more about meditation than I do. Whether you decide to hasten your karmic existence for the attainment of Buddha nature is a choice that only you can make. I do not know if Buddhism is a belief system that is right for everyone. I can share that it is a very different worldview from Western society. We can take consolation that if we don't understand what it takes to become a Buddha, we will eventually learn through the course of samsara. In closing, let me say that the Buddha had compassion for our monkey minds. He knew that we have to practice gratitude in just being and see things as not as bad as we always imagined they might be. These closing words are attributed to the Buddha. He says, "Let us rise up and be thankful. For if we didn't learn a lot today, at least we learned a little. And if we didn't learn a little, at least we didn't get sick. If we got sick, at least we didn't die. So let us all be thankful. So be it."